Good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Spear. I'm founder and CEO of EcoWatch, a leading news site that reports on environmental news, green living, and sustainable business. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today, David W. Orr, the Paul Sears Distinguished Professor of Environmental Politics and Special Assistant to the President of Oberlin College. More than 3 decades ago, David Orr helped to launch the Green Campus movement, which brought environmental ideals inside higher education and institutions. Nearly a decade later, he organized the effort to design the first substantially green building on a U.S. college campus. The Adam Joseph Lewis Center for Environmental Studies was completed in 2000 and later named a milestone building by the U.S. Department of Energy. Not only does the Lewis Center purify all of its wastewater, but it is the first building in the U.S. powered entirely by sunlight. It was LEED Platinum before there was LEED Platinum. Around the same time, David Orr proposed the goal of carbon neutrality for colleges and universities, and subsequently submitted a plan to define a carbon neutral plan for his own campus at Oberlin. This initiated a wave of plans for universities across the country. The Oberlin Project launched in 2009 as a joint initiative of Oberlin College, private partners, in the city of Oberlin, with the goal of revitalizing the local economy, eliminate carbon emissions, restore local agriculture, and create a new sustainable base for community development. The Oberlin Project was selected by the Clinton Climate Initiative as one of the 17 climate-positive projects worldwide and is now part of a small group of cities around the globe working toward these sustainability goals. David Orr was raised in the Allegheny Mountains, where a youth wandering in forests left him with a deep sense of belonging to nature. He is the recipient of 8 honorary degrees and other awards, including the Millennium Leadership Award for Global Green, the Pioneers Award, the National Wildlife Federation Leadership Award. His career as a scholar, teacher, writer, speaker, and entrepreneur expands fields as diverse as environment and politics, environmental education, green building, and climate change. He is the author of 7 books and co-editor of 3 others. Ladies and gentlemen, David Orr.
Stephanie, thank you for that. You know, the right thing for me to do is just ask questions, or ask you to ask questions of these 3 young scholars, and for me to sit down. Thanks for that. And Stanley and Hope, it's great to see you, and thanks for your leadership here. How many of you have ever been to Oberlin, Ohio? How many of you have not been to Oberlin, Ohio? All right, we've got a few. We're a small city, 35 miles west of here. If you drive the speed limit, you can be downtown to downtown in 45 minutes. We were the first college to open our doors to women and African Americans. We have a very distinguished conservatory of music. We turn out more young people from liberal arts college, our peer institutions that go on for work in PhD level in the sciences. We're in the Rust Belt. On a straight line across Lake Erie, we're about 84 miles from Detroit. And we're accused of starting lots of things in Oberlin, and we have. We're accused of being the town that started the U.S. Civil War. We propose yet another revolution, and starting with an alliance, a closer alliance with all of you in Cleveland businesses and education and civic affairs. The talk I want to give is in 4 parts. And the first part began in a meeting in the Gunn Foundation in 1995 as we were starting work on the Adam Joseph Lewis Center. I went in to talk to Dave Burkholz and John Jensen. I said, we want to build a solar building on our campus. And John Jensen, who I'd known for a while, turned to me and said, David, you're crazy. And I've heard that before. As a matter of fact, yesterday I heard it. And so the story began. They helped to launch the making of the Lewis Center. What became the Adam Joseph Lewis Center started with a series of 13 design charrettes. We brought young people in to discuss the making of the building. What would we do? and what kind of building do they want to be part of. And so what became the first building program, they did say they wanted an entirely solar power building. My response back was, do you know where you live? This is Ohio, and the sun, we get 2 sunny days here every year. And so they wanted a building also that was a zero discharge building. Drinking water in, as they put it, and drinking water out. And so we pondered that for a while. One answer to that is to put the toilets in another building. And then he had a standard. And the idea behind the building was to cause no ugliness, human or ecological, someplace else or at some later time. So you think about that as a standard. Now you have to go up to the mines and wells and forests and the places where material flow starts. And if there's ugliness, human or ecological, you can't say that the building is a great building. And the same thing downstream from the building. If it contributes to climate change and species extinction and toxification of the world, you can't say that that's a great building. Now that's like truth and beauty and justice. You never quite get there, but you have to strive for that. And so we started on this process, and one of the other things about the building that was unique was to make the building not just a place where education happened, but a place that, by the way it was designed and operated and maintained and how it evolved became educational. It was a larger pattern of instruction. So the result was a platinum level building, as Stephanie said, before there was a US GBC rating system. It is the first substantially green building on a US college campus. It is now a net energy exporter. It took a while to get there, but we have, thanks to Sean Hayes, who's the building manager. It was named as one of the 30 milestone buildings in the 20th century by the US Department of Energy. Also on that list, however, is the first McDonald's ever built. I'm not sure what that tells you, but that's the truth. A panel from the American Institute of Architects said that this was the most important green building of the past 30 years. It's been copied from Yale University's Kroon School of Environmental Studies to the Porter School in Tel Aviv. But the most important thing about the building was the effect it had on young people. It was aimed to change how we saw the world, or how they saw the world. And I think it's had that effect. It's spawned 8 enterprises. Environmental studies is not famous for spawning businesses, but in this case it did, including Lucid Designs, a high-tech building monitoring company. Sustainable Community Associates that are now doing a building in the Tremont section. But that's still, it's only a 14,200 square foot building. That's a small building. It's a small little experiment in sustainability, and the question we had to face was, could that be taken to a larger level? And maybe the best way to explain this is a story you've all heard, but let me repeat it. There's a little girl drawing a picture, and her mother comes by and says, "Honey, what are you drawing?" She says, "Well, Mama, I'm drawing a picture of God." And her mother looks down on her with some pity and says, "Well, honey, nobody knows what God looks like." And the little girl, who reminds me of one of my granddaughters, looks back and says, "Well, Mama, they will now." And I like that. This word sustainability is going to be an abstraction until we make pictures of it. We believe what we see and touch and feel and experience. And so when Marvin Krisloff, my boss, who's sitting, well, he's sound asleep, he's sitting right in front of me, came to town in 2007, began a conversation of how do we take this model up to the next highest scale? Can you design communities that are solar powered and powered by efficiency and make them prosperous, the post-cheap fossil fuel kind of community? So we began, and again, the Cleveland Foundation and the Gunn Foundation helped to launch the effort. And the models that we drew from were models that were global, the Mondragon Cooperative in Spain, the Evergreen Project here in Cleveland, people like Ted Howard and Garo Perovitz and a number of you in the room that provided models and inspiration for what we set out to do. The idea was in a small town to create a catalytic, not permanent organization, one that set a larger context. So we began with 4 goals. We wanted to build a model of a sustainable, post-cheap fossil fuel economy, right in the heart of the U.S. Rust Belt. We wanted to develop a city that was carbon neutral. That was the Clinton Climate Initiative project. We wanted a local food economy. Ohio used to have maybe 250,000 farms. We're now down to maybe 75,000 or so, mostly in the corn and soybean business. And We grow cows, or we grow the stuff that fattens cows, and then they fatten us. And then we wanted an educational venture in this. So the project, like the Lewis Center, became educational. It changes how we think about the world and our sense of prospects and our sense of what we can do in the world. And then Pat Doherty, who was a former newspaper man, works at the New America Foundation, suggested that what we were aiming to do was what he called full spectrum sustainability. And if you think about how we work in the world, we tend to silo things. We do it in the academy. We have departments of, and very little interaction between them. We silo the way we do public business. And can we begin to do this as what he called full spectrum sustainability? That just means you're going to have lunch with lots of different kinds of people. You have to learn the languages of other departments and other people and other disciplines. So we began to think about how we do the public business in a very different way, do it in a systems context. And so we saw ourselves as part of a larger experiment. Again, kind of a bench lab scale experiment in how we do public business. And we saw ourselves uniquely at Oberlin. This sounds like an advertisement, maybe it is. But we have most of the conversation around climate change and global change has been pretty wonky stuff. It's parts per million, parts per billion, it's all the policy kinds of stuff, and we're frankly boring when we talk about it. Can we start a larger conversation that includes art and music and poetry and culture, and yes, also good science? And oh, by the way, the buildings are powered by sunshine and the food is grown locally. That's a bigger conversation. So the accomplishments in this, up to this point include we are one of 4 worldwide sites that have passed muster as at the participant status level in the Clinton Climate Initiative. We're now part of the C40 cities. We're the asterisk behind all the big cities. We're the little tiny asterisk. We're not even a good-sized neighborhood in New York or Beijing. Josh, Naomi, and Ben at the Sustainable Community Collaborative have developed a $17 million building on site, or a cluster of 3 buildings on site that anchors the south side of what we're calling the Green Arts District. The Apollo Theater has been redone. We put in 2 years ago a 3 megawatt output solar array. We're 85 to 90% carbon-free electric system. We'll break ground very soon on a solar house designed for people with limited income and limited means. On June 12th, we'll break ground on what I think is the first entirely solar-powered hotel anywhere in the world. That'll be the Peter B. Lewis Gateway building. It will be a platinum-level building. So that picture that the little girl was drawing, we're trying to flesh that out. What does sustainability look like? Well, come to Oberlin, you'll see it in process, as you see in many projects around Cleveland also. There's a third part of the story, and this is another question. If we do our work well at Oberlin, we'll have a small-scale model, but it won't be worth much if that's all that it does. It's got to go to scale. And so there's a conversation that's begun in our region around what we're calling the Lake Erie Crescent. Just imagine a picture of Lake Erie, and then draw a line from Flint to Detroit to Toledo, all the way over to Youngstown, Ohio, close to where I grew up. And the conversation is about, can we take the model of what we're doing here in the Cleveland area and in Oberlin and extend that to the full region, that Lake Erie Crescent region? So a conversation's begun with universities here, including Case Western, Michigan State, University of Toledo, Oberlin. And the model is taken out of the work of Jane Jacobs. Jane Jacobs was a wonderful urban theorist and historian, but she had the idea that economies grow as city regions. And a city region grows by what she called import substitution. You figure out everything that you can make or sell or grow locally. You don't import things from long distances. And so in her reading of urban history, she showed that as cities grow, city regions grow, that builds a nation. We don't grow as nations, we grow as city regions. And so the question is, can we take her idea of import substitution and then a bit of Ben Franklin, that we hang together or we hang separately, and begin to rethink the region so that Detroit or Cleveland's problems aren't solved just within Detroit or just within Cleveland, but at the larger region. And can we take the buying and investing power, in this case starting with academic institutions, universities and colleges, of which there are 30 or 40 within the region, and begin to harness that to 3 very specific goals: getting to carbon neutrality, and that's solar energy, to solarize the region and build an economy partly out of that, local foods, and then also urban redevelopment. and begin to harness the buying power, which we already have, and begin to redirect that at things that are important in developing this larger pattern of sustainability? Can we figure out how 2 plus 2 can be 22, not just 4? Can we find leverage points so investments in any of those areas begin to spill into other areas? Now, there are 5 good arguments, I've been told, why this is a bad idea, and they go by the name Flint, Detroit, Toledo, Cleveland, and Youngstown. But there's one good idea, there's one idea why it is a very good idea, and that is it's got to be done. We have to begin to rethink our problems at a larger scale. There's a 4th part of the story, and this has yet to get started. I grew up on the east side of Youngstown, Ohio in the 50s and 60s, a million years ago to you young people. This region was a region that was incredibly prosperous. This was the heart of the U.S. economy in those years. Congressperson Tim Ryan says that or in his book describes Youngstown in 1940 as being the richest city per capita of any city in the United States. That was amazing. We were the heart of this U.S. economy. We thought it would last forever. We didn't look in the rear view mirror. We couldn't see a Toyota coming behind us or a Japan. Made in Japan was a joke. And we couldn't imagine Prius or Honda Accords. And I drove down here with 3 other, Elaine and 2 other friends in a Prius. And we also have a Honda, but we couldn't see that coming. We couldn't see the looming colossus of China coming in the distance. We were caught in a trap of self-congratulation, complacency, and frankly, short-sightedness. We had a functioning national government back in those days. Within 5 years, we passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and also the Clean Air Act of 1970. We couldn't pass those pieces of legislation today. We didn't see the dysfunction that was coming our way. That was a very different world. And now we have to make up for it at the city-region scale, the city scale. We have to begin to do what good governments ought to have been doing all along. We built an economy that offloaded costs to others, to our children and grandchildren. And for just numbers, we require 3,200 pounds of stuff to put 1 pound of product on a store shelf. 3,200 up here at the mines and the wells and the forests and all the waste that's built into manufacturing to put 1 pound of product on a store shelf. I teach young people that arrive on campus, ages 18, with over 200 chemicals in their fatty tissues and bloodstream that don't belong there. They arrive in the words of the President's Cancer Panel, pre-polluted. And then we wonder about diseases that we don't understand, the behavioral abnormalities that are multiplying. Every year, we have to burn a cube of fossil fuels, or we burn a cube of fossil fuels roughly 4 miles on edge. All that primeval goo, that's oil and coal and natural gas. And that leads to the change that is coming at us faster than most of us would like to believe. It's called climate change, or just read global destabilization. The first warning was given to a U.S. president in 1965, and 49 years later, we still have no de jure climate policy. There is no price on carbon, and owners of those fossil fuel reserves can burn those reserves with impunity and fry the planet in the process. The New York Times, a writer in the New York Times yesterday, called this the greatest dereliction of civic responsibility in our history. Reports of the National Climate Assessment 2 weeks ago show that climate change is happening now. It's not some distant possibility. It's actually underway. We're seeing climate abnormalities all over the planet. If April was cooler here, it was the 2nd hottest month worldwide ever recorded. NASA several days ago released a report showing that the melting of the West Antarctic ice sheet is now irreversible. We can't stop it. That's 20 feet of sea level rise. It'll take maybe a century, maybe 2, maybe 2.5 centuries, but that's already now in the works, and that will be an accelerating phenomenon. We're now at 402 parts per million, but there's a third of CO2 in the atmosphere, but there's a 30-year lag between what comes out of our tailpipes and our smokestacks and the climate change-driven weather effects that we see. And so we don't know what 402 parts per million will do. We do know that 355 are causing havoc. And the science is over. The assessment shows that climate change, and lots of other reports show that climate change is now underway. The final chapter of the story I'm describing is still being written. And it's been written by all of us in this room and everybody in this region and all around the world. It begins with resolving a series of questions. Can we live in the world and also preserve the world? Can we sustain tradition and also foster innovation? Can we promote freedom and cultivate order? Can we forge identity and value our differences? Can we appreciate the parts and still grasp the whole of things? I think the answer to these questions is yes. Beneath all the headlines of disaster, there is a revolution brewing. It is a systems revolution. It's a revolution in how we make the human presence in the world and how we begin to build a sustainable, durable, lovely, fair, and decent culture. Some people call this the Great Turning, and I think by whatever name it is underway. And the work of many of you in architecture and engineering and business and development in this room are in the forefront of that movement. There is a convergence of possibility, smart economics, and necessity. In architecture, if you ask, could we do the Adam Joseph Lewis Center again now with 15 years of better technology and better design and make it solar powered at a cheaper cost and competitive, the answer is clearly yes. If you ask the same questions about agriculture, could we feed the world without chemicals? I think the answer there would be yes as well. If you ask engineers to design whole systems, they know how to do that. If you ask manufacturers to eliminate waste and pollution, we know how to do that. And in this region, biomimicry is beginning to take a foothold and beginning to be used by industries everywhere. If you ask for smart and walkable and clean and green and safe cities, we know how to do that. In transportation, there are pictures in the existing Oberlin Inn of what was our part of the Cleveland area interurban system. You once could get on a train anywhere in any city of over 5,000 people and get anywhere else in the U.S. on rail. In economics, there is a revolution brewing. It's a revolution in beginning to understand what honest economics means. We can't push a bow wave of debt, whether it's climate change or pollution, off on other people. And so how do we develop an economy where the prices do tell the truth? It's a systems revolution. It's seeing the world as systems and patterns and seeing ourselves as part of an ecosphere over long periods of time. There are different questions that we raise. Instead of what can we do, there's a question of what should we do? What's connected to what? And what are the long-term consequences? And what systems people call feedback? What happens if we do various kinds of things? The new rules of the system are really quite simple. The first is simply, we get sustainability, or we pay for sustainability whether we get it or not. Somewhere, somehow, somebody will pay for our mistakes and short-sightedness. We pay in the currency of war. We pay as crime, disease, poverty, and ruined cities. The second rule is also fairly simple. Whether a small building, a city, or a region, or a whole country, or the whole world, we optimize the entire system, not its components. Health is a systems concept. You can have a healthy left leg, but if your heart is bad, you got a problem. So health is a systems concept, and we optimize the whole system, not the parts of it. Third rule is that there are very few accidents in this world. There are very few anomalies, only the working out of the system's rules. That is to say that climate change, urban decay are not anomalies. They were the logical result of the rules embedded in the larger system. We'll have to learn to do what the Cherokee Indians once did and think out 7 generations into the future. Let me close with this thought. A long time ago, the U.S. Industrial Revolution began here on the banks of the Cuyahoga River. It was in every way a remarkable combination of ingenuity, enterprise, and opportunity. And now another revolution is gathering momentum right here on the same banks of the Ohio River, the Cuyahoga River, and also in Northeast Ohio. Call it the next industrial revolution, call it a sustainability revolution, but by whatever name, many of you in this room are leading this revolution. And in time, with a bit of courage, a bit of luck, it will revolutionize how we make the human presence on Earth, how we build, how we travel, how we grow our food, how we power our communities, how we earn our living, but most important, how we think and how we think about our place as citizens in this earth. But time, that's the rub. You and I and everyone on this planet will have to act with unprecedented sense of urgency. And no one said it better than Martin Luther King remarks at the Riverside Church on April 4th of 1967, a year before he was killed. King said, "There is such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked, and dejected with a lost opportunity. The tide in the affairs of man doesn't remain at the flood. It ebbs. We may cry out desperately for time to pause in her passage, but time is deaf to every plea and rushes on. Over the bleached bones and jumbled residue of numerous civilizations are written the pathetic words, too late. We can't be too late. And I think because of the work of all of you in this room and throughout this region, we won't be too late, but we can lead this revolution. I think that we will. Thank you very much.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are enjoying a Friday forum with David Orr, the Paul Sears Distinguished Professor of Environmental Studies and Politics and Special Assistant to the President of Oberlin College. We will return to our speaker momentarily for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We encourage you to formulate your questions for our speaker now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here and those joining us through our primary media partner, 90.3 WCPN, 104.9 WCLV, and WVIZ PBS Idea Stream, or on one of the many other radio stations across the country that carry City Club programs. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. Next Friday, May 23rd, the City Club welcomes Ron Ratner, Vice President and Director of Forest City Enterprises, in conversation with Jennifer Coleman. For more information about our upcoming forums, to make a reservation or to order a CD or DVD of today's program, please refer to our website at cityclub.org. Today's program is sponsored by a generous gift from the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. We thank you for your support. Today we welcome guests at tables hosted by the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, Hathaway Brown, Medical Center Company, Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, and Oberlin College. We thank you for your support. We welcome students to today's program. Student participation is made possible by a generous gift from the Jeffrey David Epstein Memorial Fund. Joining us today are students from Hathaway Brown, Horizon Academy, Montessori High School, and New Day Academy. Will the students please stand to be recognized? Now we would like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are Program Director Carrie Miller and Marketing and Outreach Specialist Kirsten Pianka. First question, please.
Lori Wagner from LeadCo. Your sense of urgency and the science behind it is clear. The sense of urgency in the state of Ohio, how do we convey that to our legislators?
Next question, please. Well, it's called democracy. You get in and you vote, you write letters. There's no cheap or easy way to do it, but thanks for the question. It's just called politics. It would help a lot to get a lot of the money currently in the political arena out. But I'm not running for office. But I think, thanks for the question. It's tough work, but the science could not be more clear. The scientific debate is basically over. And if you study climate change for a living and have to live by the rigors of peer review, fact, data, and logic, you understand the issue. Science magazine, just on this point, several months ago, did a survey of climate scientists or people who write in climate science or peer-reviewed journals, and 97% were in full agreement with the theory. There's some disagreements about various things at the edges, but full agreement with the theory. So it's 97% to something under 3% is the ratio. So you think about how you think about those risks. If you have chest pains coming on, you don't typically go to the doctors that represent the 3% that want to put you on herbal medicine. You go to the other doctors, the 97%, that represent the mainstream and so forth. So in terms of the academy, in terms of the way we deal with this, this has to be a political battle, and it is. I think we're going to win it, but thanks for that question.
Your description of the sustainable revolution sounds to me like something that's quite disruptive, particularly for the workers, executives, and owners of, let's say, coal. If you're successful, or we're successful, as we should be, in the achieving sustainability, what should we as a society do for those workers, executives, and owners?
Well, that's a great question, and there ought to be a safety net below workers that are in industries that are moved out. But the economy, Joseph Schumpeter, the Austrian economist, described capitalism as what he called creative destruction. And so there are always workers moving out of one field or another. The workers that made Kodak cameras, for example, or the workers that made IBM Selectric typewriters, and coal workers. The interesting part about coal, however, in West Virginia, coal in 1950 was 75,000 jobs, direct jobs in the industry. It's now down under 10,000 because we've automated the coal business. And so it's displacing machines. But your question is a good one. As we move workers out of the coal industry and fossil fuel industries, as I hope they do, the solar industry is growing. In this country, there are around 7 million jobs in direct solar right now. Worldwide, it's gone over around 25 million jobs in solar worldwide. So as one industry tapers down, another is building. But there ought to be, I would be for a social safety net below workers in situations like this. But thank you very much for that question.
Hi. Oberlin has a warm place in my heart because I almost went to Antioch before I became an engineer with General Motors Institute. So now I would like you to help combine my divergent paths by making your Oberlin students technological leaders in a technological society. First thing I would like you to do is have them write long dissertations on why they can still turn on their lights and have electricity at night when there is no solar energy with all the solar panels in Oberlin. This will get them to thinking about the very significant problem that Germany and other places are experiencing with the variable output of wind farms and solar panel farms. And then the other thing is there are thousands of noteworthy scientists who do not believe that anthropogenic CO2 emissions will cause disastrous global warming, and I've been on international committees for years. We're starting a committee to address this issue with a true consensus-based process. So the process comes from the private sector with scientists, not from the government down. Thank you.
We've asked actually several questions. Let me just deal with one part of that. The electric grid is interesting. It's the largest machine humans have ever made. And if I was to ask you in this room, how many of you own mainframe computers? If I said, how many of you own small handheld devices, incredibly powerful? Let's see your hands. Notebook computers or smartphones. The same thing is starting to happen with the way we make electricity. Distributed electricity is the same kind of technology, silicon-based technology. So we will be powering our homes, our businesses, largely by distributed energy systems using sunlight and wind. And I can take you, I'll give you a free tour of the Lewis Center at Oberlin where we actually do that. Ohio is a net metering state. So we don't store power on site, but we put power back in the grid. And typically when the sun is shining, wind may not be blowing. And the reverse is true. When the wind is blowing, sun may not be shining. And so you can begin to patch these things together. And one other point that I think we've lost in the national debate. McKinsey Global did a study in 2007, and probably the most famous energy graphic ever, that showed, this is why I don't go into art, but there's a good graphic here. Imagine this line being break-even point. And on this side, a series of technologies. So lighting technology, refrigeration, variable speed motors, and so forth. And this side was below zero. In other words, you were paid to do it. And then up here, or paid you to do it, up here were technologies that went up to, say, 4 cents a kilowatt hour, which is extremely low rate of electricity. In Cleveland, you pay, what, 12 or 15 cents a kilowatt hour, whatever. But you don't pay 4, and neither did we in Oberlin. So the point of it, their graphic was that this area equaled this area in size. And the take-home message was very simple. We could eliminate, and this is the probably 2005 data, you could eliminate 40% of U.S. energy use at no net cost by the year 2040. Now you've got 7 or 8 or 9 years of better technology. That number, according to McKinsey, has gone up to 50 or 60%. So typically, we buy, this is just with smart economics, this has nothing to do with climate change, we buy twice as much energy as we need. So think of the lighting revolution. Incandescent light bulbs, 100 watts. Compact fluorescent, the same amount of light, actually better light, 17 watts. LED, 4 watts. So we go 100 to 4. That is the technological efficiency revolution. It's happening in automotive industry, it's happening in motors and variable speed drives, it's happening in refrigeration. State of the art 20 years ago, if you bought a refrigerator with something like 1,700 kilowatt hours of electricity. Now state of the art's around 250. And it's a better refrigerator, it's cost competitive. That's happening across the board. So the combination of two things, efficiency has been hard for Americans to deal with. We're better as supply increases. But imagine what we could eliminate with honest prices and prices that tell the truth, and then make up the difference with renewable energy. That technology is changing dramatically also. The cost of solar electric has fallen almost down to base load coal. That is a dramatic revolution. The technology here, if you bet on human ingenuity. Don't bet on anything else. Bet on human ingenuity in the energy field. But thanks for that question.
To now, the voice of sustainability has largely been academia. Can you talk a little bit about what civic and cultural institutions, particularly in the Lake Erie Crescent, can do to lend their voice to the sustainability argument, the sustainability movement?
Well, thanks for the question. It's a great question. We can't win the battle in the academy. It's got to be a societal-wide revolution. It's got to involve churches. It's got to involve civic organizations and political parties. It's got to be all of us coming together around this issue. So within the Lake Erie Crescent region and other regions everywhere around the world, think of the civic organization coming together. So changing the way we buy, the way we organize, the way we invest, the way we transport. And the interesting thing here is this. Sustainability isn't a long checklist of all this ain't it awful stuff. That's sometimes what it appears to be. It's actually a convergence of necessity. We have to make the change with it's the smart thing to do. It's the right thing to do. So if you look at market trends right now, we talk about growing local food. We have a goal of 70%, maybe if we can reach that, of the food consumed in Oberlin grown locally. But think also the market is moving in that direction anyway. Local foods are doing very well. That's the fastest growing sector of the U.S. agricultural food economy. People want local foods. Why? Because, well, it's the price is getting right. It's healthier. It's fresher. It tastes better. It cooks up better. That revolution is going dramatically well. You young people, I'd be willing to bet none of you will want to live at age 25 in the suburbs on what we used to call McMansions. Remember the 5-acre thing? You got to mow grass for 6 days a week and you work one day. But you don't want to live there. You want to be in downtown. You want to be over here on 4th Street. You want to be in a condominium down here. You want to be in service-rich areas of urban fabric. You want to be close to a brew pub. You want to be close to things where life is happening. You're not going out to the suburbs again. So the market has shifted dramatically in the past 10 years, and certainly since 2008. So sustainability is actually where the market is moving. So we don't have to fight this as ideology. We just have to be smart about the economics that we're pursuing. This is what people increasingly want. But thanks for that question.
Hi, I'm Kayla Holloway from Horizon Science Academy, and I was wondering, to create full spectrum sustainability, you have to have a sense of urgency. How can a high school student help with that?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, you imagine schools being laboratories in sustainability, which is kind of what we did at the Lewis Center. But it's happening in educational buildings all over the country and all over the world now. But imagine doing an inventory of where your energy comes from in your own school building, where your food comes from, where your waste goes, and beginning to develop a sustainability plan for the school. Imagine classes and courses in sustainability. Imagine using the facility as a way to learn and acquire the kind of skills that you'll need, the analytic wherewithal, the technical skills, and just basically the drive to do it. You know, I don't worry about the solvability. Can we power the U.S. economy by sunshine and efficiency? Sure we can. Could you make solar-powered schools? Absolutely. Could you make clean, green, walkable communities? Absolutely. I don't worry about those kinds of things. I worry about despair and demoralization more than those things. So the best way to avoid despair is to roll up your sleeves and get involved and begin to do things. So thanks for the question. But schools can be great laboratories in sustainability.
Kelly Simon, and I'm a PhD fellow in biomimicry from the University of Akron. Two quick questions. One, I'm wondering how you're integrating biomimicry into your current research and your work. And two, if you're interested in getting involved more in the biomimicry community here, which I think you should, by the way.
Loaded question. How many of you know the term the word biomimicry? So most all, if you don't know it, this comes out of the work of a number of people, prominently Janine Benyus, a science writer and biologist. And think of an example. A spider takes dead flies in sunshine and makes materials stronger than steel by 5 times and tougher than Kevlar, the stuff out of which we make bulletproof vests. And no waste, no fossil fuels, no sulfuric acid, no heat beat treat. It's biodegradable. It's made on site. Spiders. They have no degrees, as far as we know. It just evolved that way. So biomimicry is a field that's asking the same kind of questions. Nature has color, but nature doesn't paint. There are self-cleaning surfaces. They don't scrub down. They just are designed by nature, by evolution, to scrub themselves. So this is interesting. And you begin to think of the way we remake the Industrial Revolution. And so can we begin to learn from natural systems? Can we suspend our arrogance as humans? And the kind of arrogance that was built into the early scientific revolution. Suspend the arrogance and come to a world in which we actually learn from natural systems that solve problems all the time and never use fossil fuels. If we did a sample, I'm told, of the fatty tissues and bloodstream, virtually everybody in this room, we'd find that 200 and some chemicals are embedded in us. So we've taken the periodic table and we basically spewed it around the earth. Nature takes basically 4 things off the periodic table and makes virtually everything that we see. 4. It's carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and so forth. But we take everything, these complicated chemicals, and then we wonder why we have early cancers and behavioral problems and all this kind of stuff. It was a century of promiscuous chemistry. And now we have to learn to rethink chemistry as green chemistry. It's not an argument against chemistry, but it's an argument beginning to learn to make the human presence in the world rather the way the world works. Make buildings that function, as one of our students said years back, like trees. Imagine that. Begin to design economies with no waste, and we can do that. So now what was your question again? It was on biomimicry. Yes, I'm all for it. Yeah, and we're all gonna join the revolution, but it's a great revolution. Thanks for that question.
David, you pointed out very clearly the dangers that are happening right today of of climate change. And certainly the vast number of scientists throughout the country would agree with you that climate change is occurring, and it certainly will occur within the lives of these young people who are here today. There still are a few deniers, people who say it's not true. There is no such thing as climate change. Do you have any suggestion as to how those people how we can change the minds of those deniers?
Stanley, thanks for that, and the answer is no. I really don't. I think it is the most futile debate. Climate science is simply saying if you put heat-trapping gases in the atmosphere, you trap heat. Water vapor is a heat-trapping gas. And if you put a whole lot of heat-trapping gases in the atmosphere, you trap a whole lot of heat. And there is a good bit of the record that is totally beyond any kind of discussion whatsoever. Simply agree to it, like the laws of gravity. You can fight about it, but they're there. So with climate scientists, nobody comes up and argues about the laws of gravity. And if they do, they're very simple tests. Come to the top of the building with me and let's check it out. You jump first. So in climate science, the climate debate among people who study climate for a living has been over for a long time. And I think it's rather futile to continue arguing about what we already know. And let's make a wild assumption for just a minute. Let me say that maybe it's not 97% as Science Magazine reports. Maybe it's 50%. But you and I wouldn't get into a car if we knew the chance of a fatal accident was 50-50. You wouldn't do it. You surely wouldn't put your grandchildren in that car. So it's funny how we handle the odds here. During the Cold War, we now know that the odds of a Soviet attack in the United States were pretty minimal. And they basically were that if the Soviet Union feared a U.S. attack, they might preempt us. But having been through the archives, scientists or the researchers report, there really wasn't ever a serious threat to the U.S. as we thought there was. But we spent trillions of dollars to prevent what was a very low-level threat. Trillions. And that was from 47 until 1990. Terrorist attacks killed 3,000 people plus on 9/11. That was awful. But climate change now kills, climate change-driven weather events, according to the World Health Organization, kills 150,000 per year. And they estimate that will go into the millions. So people are already dying because of our combustion of fossil fuels. So personally, I don't care to debate the issue anymore. I think we just move on. And we do what we do because this is a convergence. This is a very interesting thing politically. And this goes back to the other question. If I only made an economic argument for doing what we do, that would stand on its own merit. So even if somebody doesn't believe in climate change, the economic argument for building green buildings and better communities and local foods, doing all the things that you do anyway to prevent the worst of climate change ahead, you do them because it's just smarter to do. It's better economics. And so you can see a shift toward a very different kind of economy beginning to emerge. And then I think there's still, by the way, a flat earth society, I'm told, with offices in London, and they're fine. So there will be deniers for a long time. I don't think and it's a free country. We had essays on freedom of speech, so that's fine. Well, Stanley, thanks for pointing that out.
Scott Sanders, Executive Director of the Earth Day Coalition. David, thank you for your leadership and vision. How can we raise awareness and support of the need to modernize our grid for the distribution of renewable energy now that we're beginning to gain the necessary efficiencies and costs of scale in manufacturing?
Well, it's a good question. It goes beyond my pay grade. And there are people, Gene Matthews here would know a lot more about this than I do, and a whole lot of other folks as well. To some degree, the most important thing, and I did mention this in the talk, is a price on carbon. Because carbon, you can burn carbon with impunity now. It's dumb to waste it, but you can burn carbon with impunity. So a price on carbon is the most important single step we can take. And then the grid, what's occurring technologically, and this again is beyond my pay grade, but the grid is changing dramatically. Distributed energy is beginning to emerge, what's called a smart grid. Right now, electrons flow from a source generally about 220 miles from where it's burned to a refrigerator, and so the electrons flow this way. The smart grid information flows back to the power supply. And you begin to get a dialogue between your machinery that uses electricity and the source of the power. Smart efficiencies will reduce energy consumption, or could reduce energy consumption in this country, I'm told, up to 80%. That you could run an economy as well, as robust, with superior efficiencies and much less waste, eliminate somewhere around 80% of the current energy use presently. So I think this is going to be a matter of state legislatures. It's going to be a matter of any monopoly. Utilities are a regulated monopoly, and their business plan was that the more electrons they sold, the better they did. But think of a business plan that changes if utilities say, we'll sell you services, not electrons. So that way, they would rent you a refrigerator. As the technology got better, they would swap it out because they would do better, the lower energy use of that refrigerator. But think of a business plan beginning to change to accord with the technology now available. So, I mean, nobody really wants to have necessarily a refrigerator. What you want is cold milk, cold orange juice, cold beer, and so forth. You want the thing that the machine does, but not necessarily the machine. So begin to sell services instead of objects. I mean, there's nothing new that I'm saying here. There's a whole different business model here. And I think that's where the technology is going. Now, if I was in the utility business, I'd be worried. Because, Bob Smith can go solar and unplug from the grid. Now I've got my fixed costs spread over a customer base -1. And then Carol Jones says, well, I've had it with the grid, I'm going to unplug, and she goes solar also. Now you've got fixed costs with a customer base -2. And so you begin to see that customer base shrinking. If I was in the utility business, I'd be worried. Because the technology now allows, and it's becoming cost effective for people to simply secede from that grid. So there has to be a different business plan emerge. And I think it is beginning to happen. But Scott, thanks for the question.
Hello. I'm a sophomore at the Montessori High School at University Circle. You mentioned being able to grow things such as plants, flowers, food, etc., without the use of chemicals. What are your thoughts on the anti-pesticide revolution, which is slowly rising into the public eye? And what can you say about the future of chemical lawn care use on family lawns and institutions?
Well, a whole bunch. Thank you. Well, I think first of all, this began with people like Rachel Carson, who published Silent Spring in 1962. So this is a kind of a long revolution, and we're frankly not winning it. So I've got neighbors on my street that live to mow. Love them dearly. They're wonderful people. But ChemLawn comes out or some other service comes out and makes the grass, revs the grass up, and they have no dandelion. You can tell who they are. They have no dandelions in their yard. And then we wonder why on our street, within a easy stone's throw, there have been 5 cancer cases. And we don't understand cause and effect. And so all that stuff goes somewhere. It doesn't disappear. And we're told, well, it breaks down. Well, it breaks down under some conditions that are ideal under lab conditions. But we're using way too many chemicals. We're using more chemicals on our lawns than we do on our farmland. So it's time to begin to rethink the way we handle lawn care. Now, I don't know who invented the lawn. It goes back to a guy named Capability Brown in England way back when. But why do we want to mow? I mean, weekends are short. Give it up. What else did you ask? I'm sorry, I lost.
I said, well, what can you say about the future of chemical lawn care use on family homes and institutions, or the one before that?
Well, I got that one. I said all I'm going to say about that. I'm again it.
I said, you mentioned being able to grow food, plant, flowers without the use of chemical use, and I guess you said this already, but what are your thoughts on the anti-pesticide revolution, and what can you say about the future of lawn care and the use of chemicals on family homes and institutions? Well,
let me just say, I think that, again, if we did a sample of your fatty tissues and bloodstream, you probably are in that 200 plus category. And President's Cancer Panel, babies arrive pre-polluted, in their word. It's time to get rid of some of this stuff. And I think as far as food growing, a question that I think you're getting to is, could we feed the world without chemicals? And I think the prudent answer is you could feed the world with a lot fewer and more benign chemicals. And I think there's a substantial scientific argument that says you could actually feed 7 billion of us with no chemicals, with the right conditions and the right know-how. That's a form of agriculture called sustainable agriculture, a word that doesn't totally describe it. A friend of mine, Wes Jackson, calls this natural systems agriculture. It's understanding how nature grows, and again, nature biomimically doesn't use fertilizers and pesticides. It sponsors its own fertility. So I think there's a revolution here in how we see the food system. And I think that revolution is connected with your health, with all the chemicals that get down to Mississippi and create a dead zone larger than the state of New Jersey right off the mouth of the Mississippi River. That used to be the world's largest fishery. Now it's pretty much a chemical wasteland. But the UN tracks about 230 dead zones around the world. We're watching the biosphere die. The bad news here is we're watching Earth die because of the way we do things. And it doesn't have to be this way. We have answers for these things. But anyway, thanks for that. And Stephanie's going to ring the gong and get it here. Thank you. Thank you.
Today at the City Club, we have been listening to a Friday forum with David Orr, the Paul Sears Distinguished Professor of Environmental Studies and Politics and Special Assistant to the President of Oberlin College. Thank you, Dr. Orr. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.